Hi, everybody. Welcome to a bonus episode of Divided Films. We are coming to you in between seasons because, we just couldn't go too long without recording another episode. We got the hankering. So we decided that we would put out an episode just about a month before our regular season starts. So it's good to dust off the microphones with you, Keith, and do a little midsummer episode here.
Indeed it is. How has your summer been, JJ?
Yeah, it's been nice. It's been a lot busier than last year, of course. A lot of things that get pushed back from last year to this year are all kind of happening at once. But no, it's good. It's been very adventurous so far. How about you?
It's been good. It's been good. Watching a lot of movies. I live by the shore, so I'm, going to the beach. Trying to work on my tan. Trying to emphasis on trying to.
Living the life, man. I don't know if red counts as a tan, but if it does, lovely tan.
I put on like SPF 70 to not get red.
You might want to upgrade.
I don't tan well either, but I try not to get red this time around.
I don't tan well either, so I don't even bother anymore. Hopefully we bring back fair as the appeal and not tan. I want to go back to Victorian age levels of beauty. Okay. So today we're going to talk about, for our bonus episode, we're going back to our childhood favorites and our least favorites, actually, because we always try to do both sides of the coin. So, we've reached back into our childhood and thought about the movies that we enjoyed the most when we were kids and the movies we enjoyed the least. And we're going to see, try to put ourselves back in our shoes, back in our, 6-7-year-old shoes, and try to remember why we liked or disliked these movies, and now put our more adult, critical point of view on it. So to get into that, we're going to start with my pick for my least favorite childhood movie, and that is the 1994 animated film
Hans Christian Andersen's Thumbelina, rated G.
Written and directed by Tom Bluth. So a little background on how this movie plays into my childhood. Growing up with my sister Alyssa, who's 2 years older than me, we had our collection of VHSs, which most other kids in the 90s had, and it was mostly Disney movies. But there was this movie, Thumbelina, that would sometimes work its way into our rotation of movie of the day that we'd watch. And whenever that was the movie of the day, I'd be very disappointed. As a young kid, I found this movie boring. I thought the characters were annoying. I thought that the songs weren't good. As a little kid, I found that there was nothing really appealing to me, but my sister really loved it. And looking back now as an adult, I feel like this is a movie that really could only appeal to little girls, for example. But now as an adult rewatching it, my opinions are the same. I still think the story is boring. I still think the characters are annoying, and I still think the songs are terrible. But Keith, if you're new to this movie, what was your fresh eye take on Thumbelina?
I realize, is this just me helping you through your childhood trauma? This is me just coaxing you through your childhood trauma.
We're gonna play therapists for each other in this episode.
I'll say this with all Don Bluth movies. I know I watched them growing up. I know I've watched them. But with Thumbelina especially, it's not good. I probably have watched this years ago, but it's not good, as opposed to it being, it's more forgettable. This movie is very, even the part where I said, that's the main song, that's the song I'm going to remember, turned out to, and they replayed it again in the credits, and I said to myself, that might stick in your head tomorrow. No, I couldn't even remember what the song was. I think I feel like I had a fever dream of Gilbert Gottfried show up, Carol Channing showed up.
Well, that's the problem. There's no real even story to this movie, because what even is the plot? So this character Thumbelina, who we're introduced to in the beginning, this miniature little girl, she meets the fairy prince in the beginning, falls in love, but then shortly thereafter is kidnapped by the animated Toad version of Charo. And from there on, the whole movie, she is just meeting a series of characters of woodland creatures who all want to get with her. Like the toad Charo wants her to marry her toad son, like ew. And then she meets the Gilbert Gottfried beetle, who is running a burlesque show for insects. And then she meets a rich blind mole who wants to get with her. And then
Voiced by John Hurt.
yeah, like what? Where did they get? How did they get these voice actors? And then Carol Channing plays the Mrs. Fieldmouse neighbor who sings to Thumbelina, possibly the worst song ever written in human history, "Marry the Mole." So I was subjected to that multiple times as a kid. The worst song of all time.
There's something I have to make an observation. I know we didn't watch these movies at the same time, and there are 7-something billion people on this planet, and whenever you do something unique, you have to say to yourself, like, oh, I wonder if anyone out there is doing the same thing as me. And chances are maybe you're not alone in that. I knew with these two movies that you and I picked, I knew that I was the only person in the world watching Thumbelina at this time.
Oh, for sure.
I'm like, who? I can't see anyone watching this or even remembering to watch this. I don't know. It's Don Bluth movies are very, very niche. At least in terms of our childhood movies. Like they fill this whole niche corner of animation.
But I'll say this about Don Bluth, because even with this movie in particular, Thumbelina, I also find the animation kind of off-putting. I thought it was like too bright and cutesy. The characters have like almost too much detail in their faces. And maybe that's a point of contention because Don Bluth is revered as an animator, at least for his time. But I think what made his 80s catalog at least like good, they're like his 80s movies are revered. So like An American Tail, Secret of NIMH, Land Before Time, and All Dogs Go to Heaven. I'm just trying to show off my animation.
All good movies, all fun movies.
All great movies, but I think what made those movies successful is that they're mature movies, they're imaginative movies, they're inventive movies. They actually could be dark at times, and they're just doing the kinds of stories that Disney wouldn't be doing. It's kind of like alternative family entertainment. And then you get to like the 90s, and a movie like Thumbelina is like almost a Disney movie ripoff in so many respects. It's like the fairy tale framework. You're even getting voice actors from Disney movies. So Jodie Benson, the voice of The Little Mermaid, is the voice of Thumbelina. Gilbert Gottfried, who has an even bigger singing part in this, they bring him into this. And even the one song I think you're alluding to as like the song, the romantic song, Let Me Be Your Wings, even that song kind of has a whole new world vibe going on, even visually.
When the prince was singing to her, I'm like, this is like a rough draft version of a Disney movie.
Yeah, right?
This should have undergone, like, I don't know how powerful Don Bluth's ego was at the time, but it's just like, this is going out, and no one said, Don, we need to really work on this.
Yeah, he wrote it. It was like his wheelhouse. And then I don't think as an animator he would really bounce back critically until Anastasia several years later, and that was maybe his last hurrah.
That was probably his most mainstream and probably the biggest hit, I would say.
Right, definitely most well known of his works was his last critical success, and again that one also is very Disney-like in many aspects. It's like the musical, The Lost Princess.
Most people think it's Disney.
Well, technically it is now because that was like technically a 20th Century Fox animation movie, a very short-lived like division in 20th Century Fox. And Disney has eaten that up. So now technically Anastasia is a Disney princess.
Technically, but like at least for most of our lives, people have thought it was a Disney movie. And I don't want, this is like, well, Frankenstein's monster is the monster. Like, okay, we understand, like Disney, Fox is now Disney, blah, blah, blah. But it's, yeah, no, it's, this movie's boring. This movie is like the equivalent of the Poochie episode of Simpsons where in the cartoon they're going to the fireworks factory and they never get to the fireworks factory.
Yeah, it is like a very boring because like I said, it's just there's not one particular plot. She's just kind of wandering around this character and meeting very like gross woodland creatures who are horny. But then, like looking back too, it is the kind of movie. Like the biggest flaw of this movie, I think, is that it's not for the whole family. Like a good animated or good family film should be for everyone's entertainment, and this one is really specifically geared towards little kids, based on the way it's animated, based on like the way the voice actors performances are. In fact, a frequent guest on our show, Heather Tedesco, is the only person I know who still defends this movie. Even my older sister, who enjoyed it as a kid, when I was texting her about we're watching this movie, she said, my sister, that movie I don't think aged very well. So even she had fell off. But then Heather Tedesco was still defending this movie, and she has a little bit of a defense clip that she sent in to us. So we'll take a listen to that.
I've truly never understood JJ's distaste for this movie. I have always loved it. I rewatched it and I still love it. The artwork is beautiful. There's fun, quirky characters. It's got a better love story than most princess movies where the princess is sleeping for 90% of the film. At least this love story is believable, and the two of them are trying to get back to each other. There's messages about friendship and perseverance and different kinds of love. The score by Barry Manilow is absolutely amazing. The music is catchy. The love songs are enchanting. And then on top of all of that, I think if you're comparing it to Disney films, sure, it's not as great as those. But just because you go to Niagara Falls once doesn't mean you can't enjoy a beautiful waterfall when you're hiking in the woods. So I think Thumbelina is a great movie. I think it stands up, and you should go watch it because it's amazing.
So that's the problem, I think, with any bad animated family movie is when you don't consider the entertainment of the whole audience, because that's sometimes why parents don't want to go see an animated movie in the theaters, because they are afraid it'll be something like Thumbelina, that they'll be bored and only like specifically little kids will be interested in.
I was asking myself, like, is this bad? And I'm like, yes, there's a lot of bad aspects to it, but it is. I don't have a problem with the animation. I always respect anime. Even in our least favorite childhood movies, there's a lot of craftsmanship going in it. But it's like if I met someone at a party, and it's nice to meet you, and it's like, oh, we met before. I'm like, oh, you were so forgettable that. Like, there's nothing that I kind of was like thinking of, like, how would I do Thumbelina? And it's like, oh, I kind of maybe would do like a Princess and the Frog type situation. I would take the Thumbelina story and put it in a different, just something that makes it stand out. Like he really kind of took the fairy tale, which is only like 10 pages in real life, and kind of just like, and you only get like the first. You kind of only see it in the beginning.
It's like, first of all, it starts with once upon a time in Paris. It doesn't even take place in Paris. And then the whole thing of the old woman who couldn't have a kid, and the witch gives her a flower that Thumbelina is born out of, fully clothed, a good witch. But
not that good.
I mean, she's kind of like a tricky witch, I guess. Like, oh, you want a kid? Here's like Thumbelina. Then the flower opens, and there she is, fully clothed, speaking English. It was like all kind of weird.
And she names her Thumbelina. I texted you this as I was watching. I'm like, I would have just named her Mary or Lily out of the flower that she came out. She goes, like, that's the first name that comes to mind, and that's the name that she goes. She goes, Thumbelina. And that girl got made fun of.
She put no thought into it.
And everyone's like, wow, that's a great name. I'm like, no, it's not.
I'd be really fun. Yeah, you could do maybe like a mystery science theater of this movie. It'd be pretty amusing. So that's my my grief on Thumbelina, a movie I was forced to watch maybe like only 8 or 9 times, but was never a fan.
Thank you for allowing me to watch a movie that I might never watch again.
It's the gift that keeps on giving. Speaking of which, we can now move on to your pick for your least favorite childhood movie, and that is the 1985 Claymation movie.
The best-loved characters of America's greatest storyteller come to life. It's the adventures of Mark Twain.
So what was your experience as a kid with this movie? How often did you watch this interesting film?
I actually had this on VHS, so... But I was trying to think of, like, what is my least favorite? And, you know, you go through Rotten Tomatoes, and it's like, okay, I liked Balto. I liked We're Back. And I know they didn't get good reviews, but I'm like, I had fun. Of course, you know, you like the Disney, you like the Pixar, especially during the 90s. But, like, yeah, I liked the Don Bluth movies.
Most of them.
Most of them. But I remember one that stuck out for me as going like, oh, I was, at least at the time, I was, I didn't think it was made for kids. And that was The Adventures of Mark Twain. I don't even remember how we got it. Like, I feel like it's like something you only buy at like a Mark Twain museum.
That's so funny, like a Mark Twain like road stop sort of like weird tourist attraction.
Watching it now is so like, I don't want to say it's bad. Like I think it's incredibly. You have to be in like a Mark Twain mood to watch it. This movie is not for kids.
No,
I think it's for adults to watch on. Like, hey, honey, you want to just watch? I used to watch this as a kid. It's kind of like, oh, I read Mark Twain, and this is kind of like the bonus episode of your journey. Like, oh, I'm in a Mark Twain binge. I've been reading his books. This is definitely out of love and respect for Mark Twain, and I kind of appreciated it in that. I appreciated it a little bit, and the only thing I remember, once again, is the scary thing growing up, which that's how we connected. That's how, like, people who watched this growing up or have seen this connected in, like, college or something. The Mysterious Stranger.
Yeah, we'll get into that sequence. I mean, I kind of get what you're saying, is this is like an homage to Mark Twain's works, which from that angle I can kind of appreciate the effort and the spirit of. And I could also see this maybe if you go to, again, like a Mark Twain exhibit, this is on like a monitor playing on loop as people like walk through, right? Like, oh, like Mark Twain, like another thing there. But yeah, the big thing with this movie is the claymation style. This is mid-'80s claymation. And to me, it was almost as if you took the claymation effects from Pee-wee's Adventure and just made a whole movie with that. It's like, oh, like the freakiest parts of Pee-wee's Adventure, let's make that an entire movie. And this is what you get.
I kept saying it's kind of cool and it's kind of ugly at the same time.
I appreciate like some of the inventiveness, but for the most part, it is very off-putting visually. Unfortunately, I mean, that's the effect you get. And then especially when things get kind of scary, it's like really scary from the combination of what they're depicting and like what it looks like. So in that spirit, because basically this movie is a series of vignettes
of his lesser known stories, or at least his, like, it's not, I mean, Mark Twain, Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn and Becky Thatcher are like the main, like, oh, there are heroes in this, but they're just going through like The Mysterious Stranger or The Diary of Adam and Eve, which I never read, and it kind of gave it a spin, you know, an updated 80s spin to it with humor. That being said, this is I can't see any kid going like getting anything out of this, even plus 10 and plus, because this is a man grappling with like religion and death, his own morality.
Most of the stories they chose to depict in this are like the more religious themed ones. So The Diary of Adam and Eve, The Mysterious Stranger, which is like Satan. Like and there are even like references to like heaven and hell throughout the in-between sequences. Like there's even I don't know if this is like an actual quote from Mark Twain or just like a Mark Twainish line that they came up, which was like Mark Twain says to I think one of the characters, "You look more disappointed than a Presbyterian in hell." Like, what? I think a Presbyterian would be a little more than disappointed to be in hell. But that was like the kind of thing, there's like constantly references to like the afterlife and to religion and stuff. I'm like, this is a little beyond.
It's kind of like examining the mythology of Mark Twain, like, the Halley's Comet, that whole, like, I was born on Halley's Comet and I'll die on Halley's Comet. And yeah, this movie's not made for kids at all. This movie, even with the claymation, is not made for kids, and it's
that whole mysterious,
I don't know.
The whole mysterious stranger sequence is how I was introduced to this movie, because a college friend of ours, who shall not be named, would subject a lot of us to this scene by playing it on loop because this movie used to be on Netflix. So when we'd all hang out together, sometimes in college, this, I mean, I guess we all kind of like to torture each other in different ways. This one guy would put on this sequence from this movie totally out of context. I'm like, what is this scene from this weird movie? And the mysterious stranger is like a horrific scene in this movie in which they meet like Satan, and they like create a little world of little clay people that they then like kill, and like the clay people are like, why are you killing us? Like, what is this? Who came up with this for a kids movie?
Yeah, it's actually that's the only sequence that, like, I think really kind of sticks out. Once again, the scary sequences in kids movies, I think, stick out the most for kids. And watching it again, I'm like, I love that whole design of Satan. I think that I wouldn't be surprised if there's fan art of it.
Right. Again, it's inventive. I appreciate that. But the whole thing of like, it gets like way too existential. The whole thing of
It's philosophy, it's religion, it's like, there's like, hey, it's Satan is just like, I want to create life, but you humans are so like little to me. Like, why do you humans do this stuff? And
the lines are too abstract too. Like, he has some lines like, I cannot be good or bad because I don't even know what that even means. Like, what? Like, what kind of line is that for a kids movie?
So at the end of the day, it's just like, I appreciate it. I won't say it's it's a good movie, but I appreciated it a little more. But the only reason one should watch this is if they're writing a Mark Twain essay or they're in a Mark Twain mood. It's kind of like that bonus episode at the end of the journey. If you read The Mysterious Stranger or The Diary of Adam and Eve or that frog short story, I think you might get a lot out of it.
That Adam and Eve stuff, that was like the wacky sitcom of Adam and Eve. like again, it was like the other way around. As dark as The Mysterious Stranger was, the Adam and Eve stuff was like really like kooky. Like tonally, this movie was all over the place.
And then they eat the apple, and then it goes horror. Like,
even that was like kind of played down though in a humorous way. And it's kind of funny too, because my big issue with Thumbelina was how overly cutesy it was. And then this is like the other extreme. It's like way too dark. And like dark doesn't mean good for a kid's movie. There has to be like purpose to it and reason to it and a level to it. And that takes it like way too far the other way with, again, a sequence like The Mysterious Stranger. If you're going to do dark in a kid's movie, there's like a level to it. And this is like going way beyond that.
It's not made for kids. And that's why it's probably it was my least favorite childhood movie growing up. It's like, I watched it, and I think I kept it in the VHS thing, and I quickly gave it away at a yard sale. I'm like, I'm not getting anything out of this. But the Mysterious Stranger bit always stuck with me. Just because of once again, I wouldn't be surprised if there's fan art. I think that's so creative.
So yeah, those are the movies that plagued us when we were kids. Okay, so we've discussed our least favorite childhood movies, gotten those out of the way forever to be repressed for another time. And we are now going to discuss our favorite childhood movies, the ones that brought us joy the most. And so we'll start with my pick for my favorite childhood movie, and that would be the 1994 movie
Jim Carrey is The Mask. This has got to be a new breed. Oh, rated PG-13.
I watched this movie so many times as a kid, and it got to the point where I still even remember the pre-movie VHS commercials and trailers. That's how much I watched this VHS. Basically, this movie has a huge influence on my personality now. I feel like a lot of this movie basically made me want to be funny. And I was like obsessed with Jim Carrey as a kid. He was like my favorite actor for the longest time. Yeah, I would reenact scenes as a kid from The Mask, and people get a kick out of that, I guess, or maybe they'd be annoyed. I don't know, but I
Do
enjoyed
it now.
going around.
Do it now.
Nah, that's okay. Looking back on this movie as an adult, I don't think it's like a great movie. I think it's a pretty good movie that still works in a lot of different regards. I still think it's really funny. Maybe not as funny as when I was a kid, but I still think it's pretty funny. I think actually it's a solid story. I think Jim Carrey is great both as the Mask and as the Stanley Ipkiss character. I actually really relate to the arc of this character who goes from like the more meek, nice guy pushover to the guy who like learns to stand up for himself. I feel like that really resonates. I think the effects still look pretty good, especially for like 1994. Funny enough, too, 1994, the year my favorite and least favorite childhood movies were released. Big year here on the podcast. I think we've actually talked about 1994 in other regards being a big year for movies that we care about. But anyways, so many things about this movie I feel like also go under the radar that should be appreciated more. I feel like the music, like the score of this movie is like very distinct and recognizable. If you hear like music from The Mask, you automatically recognize it from this movie. I just like, it's not a movie I go back to all the time, but whenever I do kind of like feel like I'm going back in time a bit to that, when I was a kid in the 90s, and I'd watch the crap out of this. So, it was an enjoyable experience having to go back and experience that again. So, what do you think, Keith? Like, what is your opinions on The Mask? If it's anything but positive, then we're gonna have to reevaluate our partnership on this podcast.
We'll have to reevaluate that another day. I really enjoyed this movie, and I really enjoy just watching it every time I kind of find a reason to watch it. I put it on randomly. I don't know if I said this on the podcast on our Sonic episode, but I randomly put on during one of my quarantine watches The Mask, and I get to see like this movie would not have. I can't see this movie working with anyone else. Maybe Robin Williams, but no, I think Jim Carrey was born for this role.
He was, yeah,
and
he's
it trickled
so perfect.
down into all the other aspects of the movie that, while we've seen these tropes before with like the other characters, like the bad guy, and it kind of works solely because Jim Carrey is giving 110%, and I think this movie falls into the category of like, it kind of has that Men in Black feel to it, both are made from like this very like
obscure
culty comic that has nothing to do with the source material except maybe the log line of it, and because of the cast of like Will Smith and Tommy Lee Jones, it really works. It makes me like love a movie, like love movies, like it just like.
The possibilities of like what can inspire a movie and where you can take it from its original source material. Yeah, because like the Mask comic book I read into is very dark, it's very violent, and it's almost like borderline horror in some regards.
He's a killer.
Yeah, he like
instead of a Looney Tune.
His kind of revenge in the comic is like through guns and blood, and in this one it's like, more cartoony. And, I think the Looney Tunes thing is, like, very well established, even in the opening. Obviously, he's not just, like, watching Looney Tunes, but he even has, like, the Tasmanian Devil pillow, which is, like, perfect because he does the Tasmanian Devil tornado thing when he's, like, in the mask, wearing the mask. Which I never really put too much thought into it, but I was, like, really doing, like, a deep thought of, like, this mask concept and what even the idea is, because you put on this mask, which apparently is inhabited by Loki. They hint at
inhabited by Loki or something like.
It's very vague. It's like the powers of
until
Loki.
Loki started becoming like a part of our pop culture. I'm like, oh, Loki, yeah, okay, duh.
They were saying the mask was like the missing Loki alter ego from the Loki show, but he puts on the mask, and I feel like it's unclear if it's like if the mask possesses the wearer or how much control a wearer of the mask has, depending on their personality. I think as he goes along the movie, the Stanley Ipkiss character gets more and more control over his powers of the mask, where almost like initially the first time or two, he's almost like he's doing things he would never even think to do. Like he robs a bank, like just like on a whim.
I thought
he
it
robs
brings
a
out
bank.
your like id. Like
It does.
brings
That's
out,
a
like,
good way to
that,
put
like
it.
that inner like he is like the guy Stanley Ipkiss watches cartoons. He has so he in his innermost core he is a cartoon. He really kind of, I feel like I was watching a live action Looney Tune at times, and that's far from an insult, and that's why when Zed from Pulp Fiction put on the mask, he brought out like this demon man.
Right, which I think is so interesting that, when Stanley Ipkiss puts on the mask, it completely covers his head. But when the villain Dorian Tyrell puts on the mask, he still has his hair for some reason.
That's not his real hair. I know, but I learned actually this one fun fact is Jim Carrey has such like a rubber face that he was able to save the special effects artists some money, because when he takes off the mask, like what his face is doing, they were able to, like, they didn't need to add any more CGI or like those special effects to his face, and I'm like, that makes me like appreciate this, like Jim Carrey in this movie more, because I really think, when we talked about Jim Carrey having the best year, I still think ever for a comedic actor.
3 movies in one
Ace
year.
Ventura, and I remember watching the cartoon, the Mask cartoon, growing up.
It was alright. Yeah, I didn't mind it.
It was part of, I think, Fox, but it was. I actually re-listened to the theme song from that. It brought back some nostalgia for me. But
funny enough, too, the Mask cartoon had a crossover with the Ace Ventura cartoon.
I know.
In one episode.
Jim Carrey kind of dominated my '90s. But yeah, no, I would say it's a good movie out of 1994. Like, I really think, it
was a solid hit. People liked it fine, and maybe I just happen to like be one of the people who love it. Again, like critically, I understand it's just like it's a pretty good movie, but I love it. Whereas most people were like, yeah, it was good, and most people had a good time at the theater with it. But it'll always hold a place in my heart. And when I go back to it too, it's like one of those movies where you watch it so much, you really start to think about things that people really, it was like never intended to put that much thought into. Like watching it again this time, in that whole sequence in the Coco Bongo Club when he's dancing with Cameron Diaz and stuff, and everyone's really into it, like, wow, what a great dance sequence. And I'm thinking, is no one confused why this guy has a green head? Like, no, everyone's just like, wow, what a great dancer. And this guy has like a green face. No one's like questioning.
When you have a zoot suit as great as that, why question things? But the music is so well, and the Cuban beat
music is
sequences,
fantastic.
I'm laughing during this movie. Like, this movie still makes me laugh.
Oh yeah, I think there's like little things too that really get me every time. Again, like the one line when he's like pretending to die, and he's like quoting all these movies. I mean, that has a huge. That's all like my kind of humor. Tell Scarlett I do give a damn. Tell Annie M to let Old Yeller out. that's amazing.
It wasn't me. It was the one-armed man.
I love all that kind of stuff.
And that's all Jim Carrey. Like, I really can't see this in a script. I really can't picture this in a script without like they let Jim Carrey go. And
I think also like the director does a really good touch to kind of like balancing all these different tones. Like, it is really funny, but the movie also has elements of obviously fantasy, because like this masked character, I mean, like the masked powers are like anything. It's like the genie from Aladdin. You can conjure things out of nowhere. You're invincible. You can do whatever you want. You can like distort reality. You can control people. It's like infinite powers, really. So there's like the fantasy element. Do you get a sense that this movie has a little bit of like a noir kind of going on a little bit?
Edge City, like, I believe it. Yeah, it has that kind of like, back alley shadow.
Right. Cameron Diaz is introduced in like a very femme fatale kind of way. Even like there's a lot of Art Deco in the production designs. Even like the Coco Bongo is like the kind of club that would exist in like the 40s in a noir kind of place. I'm like, would this be a popular club in the 90s? I don't know, but I guess given like the sort of style and the world of Edge City living in, I buy it.
It's noir in the same way like how Tim Burton made Batman noir. Like how
Right,
that
it's noir
Gotham City,
influenced.
his Gotham City is very noir. It's like that. I don't even like. It's like neo noir or neo
Yeah.
retro noir or something like that,
Yeah, it's like a sub genre.
with that hint of fantasy, which you really. I miss movies like this. I really do miss movies like this where there is kind of a chance that it could fail, but it really kind of, I don't know, it's still like, you know, they tried to, it's still popular, like, you know, whenever you think of Jim Carrey, it's one of his top performances outside of
think
like
they
Eternal
just-
Sunshine and Truman Show.
Oh right, well yeah, I mean those are his like big like dramatic showcases. And for this, I feel like they just gave themselves total creative reign because again, the mask powers are so like undefined in a good way that it could be anything you want it to be. And again, like the audience doesn't question it. As a kid, I never questioned it. Like, well, you know, why doesn't someone explain how the mask works? Like, I don't need someone to explain how it works. It's a mask. You put it on. You can do whatever you want, and everyone just went with it.
And they
I
kind
miss
of
the days-
explain it with Ben Stein, and you're kind of like, it's as
Ben
droll
Stein.
as like his voice is.
That's like a one hokey thing though. Like right before he puts on the mask, he comes home with this mask. He puts on the TV, and it's like Ben Stein talking about masks. It's like one of those cliches you put on the TV.
With all of us.
It's like whatever you put on the TV is what just happens to be immediately relevant to your life as a movie character.
Also, still to this day, the best dog actor I've seen in a movie. Like I
think
still
that
think that's
Milo the dog is like the hero of the movie. He's like the unsung hero. Obviously, Jim Carrey is like really like the human hero, but Milo is such a great movie dog. I mean, this dog, first of all, when he wears the mask, I think that's hilarious. I think that's done really well and smart to do. It's like, why don't we put the mask on the dog and like work with that? That's a great idea. And even him saving the day, running up the wall and grabbing the keys and all that kind of stuff, I totally buy it.
and like even the dog had like, and I know it's directing, but the facial expressions, like the reaction shots, I just thought I still think it's the best like dog actor I've seen on film.
Yeah, you know, when people go back and they think of dogs in movies, they think of like obviously like Marley and Me or something like that. But I think people need to remember Milo from The Mask more often because this dog, the day would not have been won in this movie without this Milo
Basically.
character. He's like real, and you know he has a whole personality too. A very very identifiable personality. So. Yeah, you know what? Maybe it's more than just a pretty good movie. Maybe it's a really good movie. I'm not sure if I'm ready to say it's a great movie, looking back, but now the more I think about it, I think it's really good. If I had to give it a percentage, I'd probably give it maybe like an 83%, something in the lower 80s.
Out of 10, I'd give it like a 7.5, but I would allow someone to give it an 8.
Yeah. I think it's in that realm. Okay, so that's our love letter to The Mask. And now we can go into your pick for your favorite childhood movie, and that would be the classic 80s, also noir influenced.
Who Framed Roger Rabbit? He's here. A Steven Spielberg presentation, a Robert Zemeckis film, rated PG.
I mean, this movie is amazing. This is definitely an amazing movie for many, many reasons. Technically, you know, the story, everything about this movie is just like mind blowing. And what was your history though as a kid watching this?
Back in the days of Saturday morning cartoons, like actually like waking up and watching the WB back then. After the WB, I think it would end at like 12 or 1, and then after that would come on Soul Train, which is not a cartoon. It starts with a cartoon, and I'm really speaking to that inner kid in all of us. It starts with a cartoon, and then it starts with Dancing to Disco for an hour, and then WB would air Saturday afternoon matinee, where they would do Romancing the Stone, Neverending Story, though like PG
Classics.
PG movies from the 80s. and early 90s. And I remember just one day you get, like, it's Roger Rabbit starts off with a cartoon, like, oh my God, another cartoon. And I grew up without cable. I grew up without cable till like I was like 11, 12. So I really kind of had the main like 2, 4, 5, 7, 9, and 11. That's really and 13. That's really kind of what I grew up with for the 90s for a good part of my childhood. So I really was limited on TV. And at least as like the young kid in me, I enjoyed what young kids would enjoy. Cartoons and humans, it works for kids, it works for adults. I'm going to come right and say it is a perfect movie, and it's only perfect in it took the premise and executed it so well. The filmmaking craftsmanship, the behind the scenes, what Robert Zemeckis and his team did was utterly painstakingly but utterly amazing.
Totally worth it.
Bob Hoskins goes all in. Christopher Lloyd goes all out. It's so, and it ages like fine wine in that, like, the more movies you watch and the more films you appreciate, this honors the noir, like, not even neo-noir, the noir
actual noir
genre so well that it kind of is now, and to me it's still like it's in my top 10 personally favorite movies, but it should be in like a top 10 great noir movies just because it does something so different.
It is like doing a great job of that whole Hollywood era of the late 40s, this golden era of animation, this golden era of film. And when those like Humphrey Bogart movies were like at their prime. And it's interesting too because it's doing what like our favorite kind of movies do, which is make us ask ourselves, how did they do that? It's like scene after scene, especially that first scene with Jessica Rabbit when she's doing her performance, and there's so much interaction with the live action characters, and it's all done with practical effects then mixed in with the animation. Like we talk about, there's a lot of movies now that have the mix of live action and animation, but when you talk about like Space Jam, for example, that a lot of that's just done with green screen, and it's like kind of like the easy way. This, like Roger Rabbit, this is like the way it should be done to really blur the line between animation and live action, where you really, like, for a second can get lost and believe that these two different dimensional characters are existing in the same frame,
and they acknowledge it, and like you can't kill a tune except with dip. Like it creates
conceptually
rules.
It's solid.
It creates the rules and really kind of stays within it. But if you really want, like, I'm sure this, I watched it on YouTube, but like the craftsmanship of when the weasels go into Eddie's apartment, and and he has Roger in the dishwasher, it's like a pipe coming up spitting out water, and he's like pushing it down. Or when Christopher Lloyd is doing shave and a haircut, it's kind of, I love this movie so much. And one memory that always sticks out with me is like when I discovered this movie, I think I was doing like, both my parents worked, so I did like after school care, and every once in a while someone would bring in a movie, and I was so excited. I remember renting this from Blockbuster going, I would love to show Who Framed Roger Rabbit. I watched this, I must have been in 3rd grade. I think that's probably when this all, and the movie starts the cartoon, everyone's gathered around, and then Baby goes like, what the hell is going, damn it, Roger. And all of a sudden, like, the parents, the people in charge of the after school care go like, oh, this movie might not be really fit for kids. I'm like, no, but it's really good. And I remember I didn't get like in trouble, but I was like, we can't, like, we have to stop this like right there. And I was so disheartened. But that always kind of sticks out for me. But
because that's where like the movie really, you understand like the essence of the movie, when it's like, damn it, Roger, cut, and that's it's a perfect intro, and it also gives you a good sense of how there's things for both kids and adults in this, because you get like the cartoons that kids love, but then it's like something unexpected that adults would like, the behind the scenes.
Well, the writing on it is so clever. Like, it's like, do you know anything about show business? It's the only business I know. Like, it's very, it touches that thing in all all of us, whether it's like
even without the visual technical achievements of this movie, it is like very like it's a great script. The live action actors, like you said, Bob Hoskins, they're all like great and living in this world, and like again, like even without that amazing magical element of the live action animation mix, you'd still have like a very like fascinating, and involving story.
Well, apparently they tried it before. I've never seen this movie, but they tried to do something before, like within the same year-ish with Brad Pitt, a young Brad Pitt, and it's the idea of humans and cartoons mixing together, and I think that's a terrible movie. Like that's
Yeah, I think I've heard of something like that, like where he's like on drugs, basically.
Yes, it's kind of more R-rated or PG-13, but I've seen the poster or VHS tape of the cover of it. And
yeah, I'm aware of like that.
I'm aware
movie.
of it, and I don't want to watch like a bad movie unless I'm doing this for a podcast.
Right.
But it's like I want more movies like this. I want but something that just fills the heart of like both the entertainment side and the film craftsmanship side. That just
Craftsmanship.
That's a great last name, but just something that fills both. Just to create an entertaining movie that I think that only gets better over time.
Right, and we always say time is the best measuring stick for success in films, and it still looks amazing all these years later. I also think it's interesting too that Robert Zemeckis has made like a bunch of iconic movies, specifically from like the mid '80s to like the late '90s, but I feel like when most people think of Robert Zemeckis, they do think of either Forrest Gump or they think of Back to the Future. And for some reason, I feel like this movie gets like a little lost in his, really accomplished filmography. But as much as I love Back to the Future, and I like Forrest Gump okay, but I feel like this movie should stand out more and be more of like a landmark movie than it is. I feel like it doesn't get that as much of a landmark status as it deserves.
I just checked. And granted, this is not a measure of excellency, but I'm shocked, and I don't think it's ever been on IMDb's top 250 movies. I do agree with you that there is, like, people are kind of remembered that they like, oh my god, yeah, that's an amazing movie, but it's never on any.
You have to remind people.
Top 10 lists, but I don't know.
It's not like people really, people always remember again Back to the Future or Forrest Gump, but do they like go? They have to be reminded of Who Framed Roger Rabbit a lot, which I think is too bad. Also think about the fact that you have like Looney Tune and Disney cartoon characters in the same frame as well. That like the two big studios came together and agreed, like I don't know like how, maybe from reading the script or whatever. I want to like maybe learn more of the history behind how they brokered that deal. That's like it's worth like bringing our flagship characters together on screen for what is essentially, I think, like a great American film and great American moments in film. So like Bugs Bunny and Mickey Mouse together in the same frame. Amazing.
That's a great shot too. Him falling and I actually did know a little bit of the history.
Okay.
They only agreed to it if they could have the. I believe it's the same amount of words, not lines, but I believe that like Mickey and Bugs have to have the same amount of words on screen.
Okay, that makes sense. You can kind of tell a little bit. They are very economical with what they are saying. And then even too, like earlier in the film, the piano battle between the two famous ducks, Donald and Daffy, really great stuff. The Mickey Mouse Bugs Bunny stuff also, I think that particular scene happens very almost unexpected. You almost like, I feel like people go into the movie maybe if
that's
it's like
for us.
Yeah, if it's like, what year was this movie? Like 1988 or 89?
88, 89. I want to say 89.
People go into this movie and they're like, I don't know if this was in the promotional materials, that particular scene with those two iconic characters, but they go into it thinking like, oh, like we know what we're getting to. Hopefully we'll see either Bugs or Mickey. But then you get so involved in the story that you forget to look out for that. And then this happens maybe like with only 15 minutes left in the movie, and they finally come, and it's like so unexpected. It's like, oh my gosh, there they are. Yeah, as a kid, it blew my mind, and it's still like magical to see as an adult.
And the attention to detail as an adult, like, and I've noticed this before, but I really kind of noticed this on this rewatch, is like in the beginning when you're kind of getting a quick exposition shot of Eddie and his brother, it's really just kind of camera over the newspapers and over the picture, and it's just like the Valiant brothers they rescued the nephews, Huey, Dewey, and Louie saved. They got Goofy off of, like, he's not a communist. They thought I'm like,
yeah.
I'm like, oh my God, this
stuff.
is the world in 1947. This is a great LA noir
so clever
movie.
The way they're able to like bring these cartoon characters into like real world like societal issues at the time.
It's a way into my heart, this movie.
That's really clever. Yeah, man. So that I have to say too, this was not a movie that I initially watched as a kid until I was a little older. I don't think I really caught it until maybe I was like 11 or 12, unfortunately. But I think I would have loved it as a kid. And, going back to what you said about panning and seeing like the different news articles and stuff. I mean, that was really Zemeckis' bread and butter was like visual storytelling through like different set pieces, because he even does that too in the beginning of Back to the Future with different like news articles to like set up the instead of verbal exposition, you get more visual exposition, which I kind of prefer. It's like less tedious. Maybe you could say it's a little cliche, like a newspaper article that happens to be about this person's life, but I rather have that than someone just saying like,
I think it's fun.
Don't you remember your whole life, which will now tell the whole audience.
The fact that they saved Goofy from being like they thought he was blacklisted, and then he
that was the big thing.
The attention to detail in this movie is A+. It is a perfect movie in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. It is up there, and like I said, it should be like more of a milestone in people's minds than it's given credit for. Because like I don't even know if it's like on the AFI top 100 list, because it should be. I'm not really sure like where it stands in all those.
They
like,
need to
big
update
lists.
that thing. Too many good movies.
I know.
They need to update.
I mean, also like, why even? I have suggested too for the AFI top 100. Don't even like rank them. Just do like top 100 movies in no particular order, maybe in alphabetical order. Because like to even rank, like, okay, how do we decide if this movie should be top like number 56 or number 57? Like, who cares? Just put like not even 100. Top 500 movies. Like, there's too many movies. It's like 100 is like not enough space for all the great movies.
We don't even have to write AFI. We'll just call it JJ and Keith's new updated AFI list of what deserves to be on there. All these websites do it anyway, so let's
there is like a very popular podcast now, Unspooled, which I do listen to, that tackles like what they think the top 100 should be, but I even say like make it bigger than 100, make it like 500, 1,000, I don't know, whatever it is. Okay, man, so this has been great revisiting these movies that we liked and maybe like getting our gripes about the childhood movies that we didn't like, but it was a fun revisit nonetheless.
Yes, and I can't wait to start a new season with you.
Yeah, we have a lot of really great movies I can't wait to discuss and figure out where we stand on the divide. So that's coming this fall to a platform on your phone. So keep an eye out for that. We should be releasing episodes towards the end of September, and we'll keep you guys updated on our social media. But until then, thanks a lot, guys, for listening, and you'll hear from us soon.